What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the channel. My name is Michael, and I hope you are having an awesome day. So we're continuing the Sabaton series. This time we got Uprising, the 1944 Warsaw Uprising, Sabaton history. So we're going to learn some information about what's going on with the song, get some tidbits, and then I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the reaction of the song. Really cool that this band does the history aspect and then does the music of it. I think it's really cool blending the two together so you get some context behind the song. Love it, love it, love it. Drop a like and let's go.
When the struggle is so monumental that you know you will not win, you know you will not survive, and you know you will not even make great change, and yet you still make that fight.
And our song Uprising is about that.
That is a powerful.
This is Sabaton History, and I'm Spartacus Olson. I'm sitting in for Indy today because the current pandemic has left many of us stuck in different places over the past months and thrown our recording schedule around a bit. But I'm also the host and lead writer of the subseries War Against Humanity on our World War II channel, where I cover resistance, partisan warfare, war crimes, and crimes against humanity during the Second World War, which are also the topics of Sabaton's song Uprising. Okay, so it's July 1944. The Eastern Front is in motion. German Army Group Center has collapsed in the face of repeated offensives by the Soviet First Belarusian Front, now striking deep into Poland. It is widely expected that capturing Warsaw will be the next thing on the list of the Red Army objectives. With the end of the German occupation literally on the horizon, the leaders of the Polish underground resistance, the Armia Krajowa, or Home Army, meet for a secret meeting. After nearly 5 years of occupation, humiliation, and suffering, the resistance of Warsaw is eager to rise up. Radio calls are made to the exiled Polish government in London, who in turn appeal to the British and American authorities for help. The time has come. The Poles will now fight to take back their capital. However, the Western Allies are hesitant to promise help outright. They welcome resistance against the Germans, sure, but they do have logistical problems with the fight in France and Italy in full swing at the same time. But mostly, this is the Soviet theater of war, and they don't want to step on any toes, so the Poles will have to rely on Soviet cooperation first and foremost. However, the position of the Home Army towards the Soviet Union is one of uncertainty and mistrust, as memories of the pact between Hitler and Stalin that had swallowed and divided Poland are still pretty fresh. If the Poles do nothing, then the Red Army will overrun Poland and the government in exile will be powerless in the newly communist Poland. But if the rising is successful, then Warsaw will be in the hand of democratic Poles. Then they hope that the autocratic Soviet Union can't simply impose its will on Poland, so the Poles have everything to win and everything to lose. However, the Germans still have strong forces in the region. If the resistance rises up before the Wehrmacht there can be wholly engaged with the Red Army, the Germans would most certainly crush them. So the Polish Home Army has to wait for the last possible moment when the Red Army is on the outskirts of Warsaw. Then, with logistical help from the West and cooperation from the Red Army, the insurgents could drive the Germans out of the city. At least one of those two last things has to happen, or the rising is doomed.
Do you remember when the Nazis was the rule on Poland?
Interesting to say the least. You know, we in history learn about this kind of the ghettos, everything going on, and the writing that they have, and you know, like Spartacus is mentioning the uprising aspect and finding the logistics. I mean, you're in Poland right now. The Allies are on the west. The Russians are on the east. How do you even, navigate yourself? I mean, you kind of. It was smart on the western side of the Allies, to not jump into this. One, like they said, to not step on the toes of the Russians. But two, how would you work that out logistically? I mean, you're basically cutting across up north over Germany and then coming down just doesn't really work.
1939, and the Allies turned away. From the underground rose a hope of freedom as a whisper. Sitting in despair, but they never lost their faith.
Back in February, the resistance fighters outside of Warsaw had made contact with Soviet Marshal Rokossovsky's spearheads. Rokossovsky agreed to principal tactical cooperation, but refrained from promising anything beyond that. And when the Home Army then begins revealing itself to the Soviets, they are greeted with unexpectedly hostile behavior. The available reports of the NKVD, the Soviet Interior Ministry and Secret Police, paint a clearer picture of the situation. They call the Polish Home Army illegal formations, rebels, and bandits. They are white Poles allied to Great Britain and are an old enemy. See, although they currently fight the same enemy, Polish nationalism is contradictory to Stalin's plan. And of course, it's only been a bit more than 20 years since the Poles won the Polish-Soviet War, and one of the people really responsible for the loss of the Battle of Warsaw back then was Joseph Stalin. The NKVD makes it clear that they will not allow any irregular or partisan actions in the rear of their armies. Soon, any Polish resistance fighters caught behind the front line is arrested, disarmed, and removed. By July, more than 30,000 Home Army fighters have been interned by the Red Army. Inside Warsaw, the Home Army is caught between the desire for action and the need for caution. The atmosphere in the city is tense. Pole and German alike feel that something is about to go down. By August, the Soviet front draws close, and while the Wehrmacht prepares to halt Soviet attacks across the Vistula, the Home Army decides to risk everything. On the night of August 1st, groups of armed young men break curfew and gather throughout the city. At 0500, they strike. German trucks are bombed and German patrols gunned down. They storm the railway office, the post office, and the major power station. Most importantly, they capture storehouses, taking German helmets and weapons, camouflage jackets, and even SS uniforms. To distinguish themselves from their enemy, they wear their white and red armbands or eagle insignias. Around 2,500 insurgents fall the first day, and many civilians are caught in the crossfire. But although they are not able to make the police district or the airport, the day is considered a success. They have been able to free many Jews from the SS concentration camp known as Goose Farm, and even managed to capture a tank. Large parts of the city are now under their control, so they must continue the fight until help arrives. They inform London by radio that the fight for Warsaw has begun. On the night of the 4th, the first British bombers are spotted over the skies of Warsaw. The Poles rejoice as crates filled with weapons and supplies are parachuted in. They have not been forgotten by their allies. The Germans, however, are now reacting as well. Anti-insurgency specialist SS Obergruppenführer Erich von dem Bach arrives in Warsaw. He reports back to SS Commander Heinrich Himmler the real scale of the rising, and Himmler flies into a violent rage. He orders von dem Bach to not only crush the insurgency, but to obliterate Warsaw. The home of Polish history and culture is to be liquidated once and for all. The Wehrmacht, however, had their hands full fighting the Red Army, so Himmler orders his own SS troops to Warsaw. What arrives at that city is an assortment of some of the most notoriously undisciplined, criminal, and murderous SS units the Nazis have to offer. The SS Brigade Dielewanga, the Russian SS Rona Brigade, Cossack and Azerbaijani auxiliary regiments, several Einsatzgruppen and military police units, and for a few days, these units take Himmler's orders literally. Fighting the insurgency almost becomes a secondary objective as they kill every man, woman, and child in sight and systematically set their homes on fire. Tens of thousands of people are slaughtered. It becomes so bad, with so many reports of rapes and looting, that von dem Bach has officers shot to try and rein in the men. He has to issue orders to not summarily shoot women and children anymore. The city becomes an urban battlefield. Loudspeakers urge the insurgents to give up before they are all killed. The Luftwaffe and German artillery bomb the rebel districts, but the insurgents prove resilient. They hide in Warsaw's deep cellars and use the destroyed buildings to entrap the enemy.
Wow, I mean, that's such a loaded statement. The fact that, Himmler's sending in some SS units and, they're taking basically political prisoners, just people in general, kind of a mesh of individuals into this army and unit, and just some of the crimes that we're seeing and that we're witnessing, like they're just murdering and raping and pillaging and killing everybody inside on a uprising. And it's just a loaded statement. And wow.
Enemy. They lure them into killing zones where snipers and grenadiers await them. The ruined city denies the SS their numerical advantage, and after 2 weeks of fighting, neither side has that advantage. The Poles fight from the street barricades and fortified cellars connected by trenches and sewers. Women and children work tirelessly in underground kitchens, hospitals, and makeshift workshops. Days turn to weeks. By the end of August, though, even as the spirit of the insurgency is still high, the outside world is eerily quiet.
When men and children fight, they will die side by side. And the blood they shed upon the streets was a sacrifice willingly paid.
Even contemporary German sources expect the Soviets to try to link up with the insurgents as quickly as possible. The Red Army advances towards the Baltics and the Balkans, but not on the Vistula. Winston Churchill is among the first to make the assumption that this pause during the most critical moment of the Rising, where any Soviet attack might have tipped the scale, is deliberate. Rokossovsky stands just 20 kilometers away from Warsaw.
Jeez.
How come, since the end of July, not one Soviet aircraft has been seen flying over Warsaw? No drop has been made, no shelling of German positions. Did Stalin condemn the Rising to its fate? For historians, it's impossible to know Stalin's exact inner motives. Many of the records regarding Poland are still sealed tightly in Russian archives. Reliable intelligence was certainly scarce, and the reports from the NKVD portray the insurgency as a reckless adventure by a gang of criminals and bandits. Polish nationalism has no place in Stalin's great strategy. The British will cancel their airlifts as well because of the inefficiency of sending planes from Italian air bases 1,300 kilometers away. There are actually over 200 U.S. Air Force planes stationed in Poltava, but Stalin denies them airspace over Poland. Inside Warsaw, losses are heavy on both sides. The Germans have been forced to reinforce the SS with crack units like the Hermann Göring Panzerdivision, and slowly but surely the insurgents are pushed back into the city center. Fighting continues unabated in the cemeteries, the suburbs, and the former ghetto, but by September the situation grows desperate. They have held out far longer than expected, but they cannot win a battle of attrition. Down to a quarter of their fighting strength, and with food and medical supplies dwindling, negotiations for surrender begin. But just then, in mid-September, the Soviets suddenly attack the eastern outskirts of Warsaw. It is General Berling's army, made up of Polish communists and collaborators, who attack the German garrisons. Soviet planes now drop supplies, and Soviet artillery shells the city.
So we hear statements like this and we look at it, and it's really crazy to think about, even amidst conflict, human lives are sacrificed in the sense of political games, and we've seen this throughout history. And even right now, what's going on is a political game. We see that Stalin had lost, Poland previously, so he had some anguish and kind of intensity amid that, or amongst that, where he was kind of up in his feelings and didn't really want to react to it. And now we're seeing a reaction after, the Polish have already suffered extreme casualties, extreme loss, and now we're starting to see some action.
All surrender negotiations are broken off and the Polish spirits rise. Volunteers swim the Vistula to greet their allies. But they never return. Reports soon reach the home army that those volunteers are arrested and interrogated about their holdouts and their officers, and some are even tortured and shot. Berling's attempt is not the long-awaited Soviet offensive. Rokossovsky does not move, and the insurgency is doomed. On September 18th, a large fleet of flying fortresses make one last supply run. But it is too late. Nearly all of the crates parachute into German territory as the insurgents are by now pressed into a small area in the city center. Left with only a handful of blocks and streets, the Home Army has no real choice. They can either surrender to the Nazis, who will probably murder them, or try to escape to the Soviets, who will likely turn on them as well. The final shot of the uprising is fired on October 2nd. It has lasted 63 days. Civilians and insurgents alike are arrested and sent to concentration camps. The ruins of the western part of the city are now once again occupied by the Germans. In the east, just across the river, the Soviets stand and watch. Poland, once again, is divided between the Germans and the Soviets, but not forever, for the old words ring true. Jeszcze Polska nie zginęła, póki nie śpiemy. Poland is not yet lost, as long as we live.
Wow. All right. You know, I'm looking forward to checking out the song Uprising, but I mean, this is one of the sadder ones that I've witnessed and watched. Just seeing what kind of transpired. They were kind of basically in a rock between a hard place, and they didn't really get the most help from both sides, and they were kind of just, in a sense, like a lamb left at the slaughterhouse. And that's just, it's just unfortunate, and there's just so much context and so much history and just so much, you know, destruction during this period that literally altered the course of the world. And I mean, the relevance is still now, you know, is still here. Some of these documents are still sealed. Like, this has been, you know, 70 plus years, and we're still reeling from some of these effects. But anyway, stay tuned. Uprising, Sabaton History coming your way. And as always, for me, stay healthy, stay happy, and have a blessed day. Peace.